you have a tool that would proactively go out there and search for what are interesting questions you might want to ask.
Oh, interesting. Before you've even asked the question.
Exactly, which can help kickstart a lot of like really interesting things. Scan proactively your database. From the thread perspective, I can ask the question, I'll have follow-ups, I'll have explanations of a little bit of traceability. Show me the queries to do this. Can I edit this and see how it will change things? Show me what the table underneath looks like. Like, it's a tricky balance between giving the user context and something that's like useful. But it's, again, that just took 1 minute, 50 seconds. Index 2.0, that's what we're up to.
You're basically building an analyst here, right? Like an AI analyst, having a partner to think through what questions to ask. How should I measure these things? Are you looking to replace data scientist or data analyst? Is that the mission here?
Hey everyone, before we get into the show, we want to announce something really exciting. We're kicking off 2 new completely free learning series, one on AI evaluation and one on agentic analytics. If you head over to dataneighbor.com, you can see the full live schedule as well as get any of the past recordings and free practical resources. We've got a ton of really interesting workshop topics planned, from analyzing product data in Claude Code, to designing your first AI evaluation plan, to creating custom annotations tools, to validating the business impact of AI features, to cracking the data science interview leveraging AI tools. You'll find the full schedule and everything else at dataneighbor.com. And if you want to go even deeper, we're offering 2 cohort-based live hands-on courses. One's called AI Analytics for Builders, where you'll learn how to leverage AI to become your own product data scientist, become analytically independent, stop waiting on analysts and data scientists to answer your questions. And the other one is AI Evaluations for Product Development, where you can start to actually measure the tangible impact of your AI features on user outcomes to business outcomes. They're both super hands-on, practical, cohort-based courses. You're going to work with us as well as other AI practitioners in the field to learn week by week for 5 or 6 weeks. And at the end, you'll have a really strong understanding of either how to leverage AI to become an analyst or how to conduct the right analysis to evaluate AI features. So we hope you'll join us. Check it out at dataneighbor.com. Now back to the show. Welcome back to Data Neighbor with Ravi and Sean. We have an exciting show for you today. We're diving into how AI is reimagining BI, the future of data analysis. And we're joined by Xavier, one of the founders of Index, a company building what might be like the next evolution of how teams are interacting with data. Javier, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've already had a lot of fun with you guys in the preview.
Yes, likewise.
Welcome, Javier.
Thanks for being here. Before we get into like what Index is today, I want to ask you, what's the problem you're kind of seeing in the way teams use data that made you want to build something new?
I think just like taking a step back, even from like diving right away, into kind of like the data thing. I was telling you guys before that trying to have like that product designer mindset around like, okay, what are the tools that we spend a lot of time working on? And, just holistically speaking, I don't know about you guys, but I spend a lot of my time obviously looking at dashboards or writing, SQL queries, but also working on my document editors, on my tickets, on my, like messaging people in the team. So when I when you looked at each of those kind of like tools, there was a clear gap on that dashboard as a surface, where it's like, okay, like a product focused team just working on that problem could build something really, really meaningful. And I know the team as well. I like enjoy just building good tools, like beautiful, delightful tools. And so for us, like that was sort of like the initial thesis that we saw, where it's like, hey, we know all the little like 1,000 paper cut problems, which I'm sure we'll get into, which is like, what is the big problem you saw? It's like, well, there's 1,000 problems, like it's like the tools are slow, they're not local first, which has a bunch of implications around like performance. Like, obviously, you're not truly taking AI very seriously because it's brand new. Who can blame them? It's like, there's like a bunch of things, but it's like, hey, if you're willing to dedicate, the next 10, 15 years of your life, which is a big commitment, to kind of like just like nailing a beautiful product, I think it's worth it. And so that's kind of where we came about it, rather than kind of like whiteboarding a business case of like, here's the gap,
Right.
And that sort of like problem specific way, we saw a lot of things that could be served by a better next generation tool.
Do you think there's some sort of misunderstanding that kind of existing companies or tools have with how people use data, that you kind of, when you think back to your experience using data or the people you talk to who use data?
Yeah, I think there's a few. So I'm just going to go through them, and a not
please.
sort of like, so again, I come from it from like not, which is kind of funny, not as a data scientist background, but as a user of the tool, not necessarily like as a full-time practitioner. So which is kind of like a bit of a different kind of like angle, not necessarily influenced by, like I think like the data world, kind of like latches into some terms, it's like, oh, we need to figure out like the semantic layer, or it's like, we need to define our metrics here. We need to all of these things. But then like when you actually talk to users and you see what tool they're actually using, they're using very simple like tools. They want a bar chart, or
Google
they want
Sheets.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, or yes, like forget even like the data tools, right?
Yeah.
Like and I feel like that there's like this huge disconnection between kind of like what people are talking about in like, data world, Twitter conferences, investors, VC driven thing, and what's actually on the ground, where people are like using very simple tools. Like, and again, we've talked to like, hundreds of people, and close to 500 people, like, because I remember, because I had to run this thing for like this number recently, different people, and it's like I feel like there's like that disconnect, right? Where it's like there's like a lot of hype in this world, and then there's like the reality here. So that's one part. And kind of like trusting your intuition around that, because we've heard about it. It's like, oh my God, so many data tools have been built, but I'm like, okay, but what are people actually using? And can you actually build something better than those like, open source like projects? So that is one thing. And then the other thing is like that I've seen is like keeping it simple. You kind of like alluded to the Google Sheets example. That's like the lowest common denominator there, obviously. But one thing that I think we've seen over and over and over, and that has informed a lot of our vision and how we think about things, is like, what are people actually using now? And for example, one thing is like, hey, I want a dashboard. Like customers constantly keep saying that they don't want a notebook. They could not they don't have a mental model for how notebooks run necessarily, And so obviously that affects sales, right? Which I know we don't necessarily, talk about in the sort of like data context as much, but like if you're building a company, you're like, what are people going to buy? And so it's very kind of like trivial, but it's like people want, a dashboard. So it's like, give them that. So that is like the form factor of like, how do you kind of like bring this idea to life is sort of important. Navigating that, especially in the world like of AI, right? Which is like completely different form factors. You cannot just like, maybe give that to folks. But yeah, that's something else that I think like trying to understand what are people actually are asking for. Like we found it's like, hey, give me dashboards, and it's easier for them to grasp. It's like, oh, there's like a next generation Tableau, a next generation Metabase, for example, rather than like, dashboards as code, or, a notebook, or something more, that might be cool for a data scientist, but not necessarily like mass appeal to solve business problems. So those are two trends, basically. Yeah. I know that they're kind of like, I expanded a little bit on them, but hopefully it kind of like makes sense, because it's the things that we keep just seeing over and over and over again.
All my stakeholders always default to dashboard. I've never had a stakeholder be like, hey, Sean, can you make me a Jupyter notebook of my whatever over time segmented by this? And I don't want to ask for that. I like using them, obviously, for like doing some EDA, but it's not
I like
this.
them too. Like that's how I learned to do a lot of stuff, like, and in college I used them, and dude, we had this professor, sorry, this is a complete segue. We had this professor that I had the coolest class called History of Data. And it was like a joint
that's pretty
class.
cool.
It was a seminar. Dude, it was the coolest class. It was a history teacher and an applied math teacher. The applied math guy was the head of data at the New York Times. So, I mean, you can imagine the bar there. And it was crazy. It was so cool. Like, everything was on a Jupyter notebook. So it's like, I'm not against it, but it's like, when it comes to kind of like like at the end of the day, what is your mission, If it's to kind of like, make the next billion knowledge workers data literate, I don't think, you need to kind of like understand what is the form factor that will be able to kind of like go there, while also understanding, by the way, your technical constraints. So for example, for Index 2.0, we'd be very thoughtful around how we do this, right? Because like, I'm jumping the gun there a little bit, but imagine like you have a dashboard, you have like 6 charts. Maybe you don't want to refresh all of them, or you don't want to like do things, you don't want to send one agent to everything. Like there's a bunch of like technical things you have to think through, but yeah, like form factor and speaking the language of the user matters a lot, I think.
I think that's probably one of the most underrated aspect of making stories come through to kind of stakeholders or like business users on the power of data or whatever you're trying to convey. Because like just making things, I'm just going to throw out a super simple example, making things a little bit more beautiful actually, and there's probably a study around this if you know about this, actually gets people to, you know, like to stay on the dashboard, let's call it the dashboard, longer, because they're like, wow, this is so cool, let me see what's in it. Kind of like, just like you had mentioned before we click the record button, if people come across a ugly looking product, they're probably going to bounce or form some sort of a first impression off of it, justified or not.
Trust it less. Yeah.
There's
a
like
lot
some
to that,
implicit like belief that someone has credibility or the graph has credibility, honestly, if it doesn't look like a piece of shit. Like, it's like this raw thing with a bunch of crappy colors. It's the same exact data from the same exact analysis, but if you make it look clean and get to the point, there's just more trust in it.
Right. And one other thing, sorry, is like, this is not something that I think applies only to data. Like, it's not like it's like some insightful, super genius thing. It's like, if you look at every other category, that is true for those products. You know, like there's a reason why like there's 1,000 note-taking apps, but no shit happens to kind of like crack through. Even though I know people have some, you know, some thoughts about that tool. Same as Figma, same as Linear, same as all of these other categories. Like, there is an element of like product quality to that. I will also be my own devil's advocate here. I was actually on a walk with another founder, pretty successful, separate category customer support, on Sunday or Saturday. Very long walk. Also, he's also very product focused, quality focused, whatever. And it's like, yes, that's important. It's necessary, but not sufficient. It's like, you need the quality, you need all that, but you also still need to be effective, have the feature sets, you know, kind of like all the practical stuff, the right form factor, etc. So I also don't want to drink my Kool-Aid too much, you know. It's almost kind of like as a self-check there. But both things are necessary there.
You mentioned AI earlier. When did you start to feel like AI could be an actual real solution for data analysis and not sort of pie in the sky kind of thing?
Right. So I don't know about you guys. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like when this happened, because I'm a neophyte. I love trying and playing with all the new tools to a, you know, probably a fault here. And I sent to the team like all this stuff. And so obviously, like, I think it was obviously, you know, with like whatever, November 22, whenever that happened with ChatGPT, which is like, oh, this is going to be able to write SQL. Like, that was pretty obvious right away.
Totally.
And then obviously, you know, I think like the consensus there around like, oh, you're going to need to feed it context and like all this stuff, that was pretty obvious right away. Funny enough, we did not focus right away on building AI features because I don't know if you remember how I was telling you, there's like all this like foundation stuff that we had to get right. You know, it's like, okay, how does your like, you know, integrations come in? How can you make things consistent across all of them? Like building all the like building blocks. And so in a way, we kind of made a bet that's like, hey, you know, we're resource constrained. So it's like, we're going to bet that like, we're going to kind of like get the puck when it's like, you know, ahead. By the time we're finished doing this, it's going to get good enough that we'll catch up and we'll be able to kind of like do that. I think Claude, I don't know if you with other guests have like made it that like this specific, but I feel like with like Claude, Sonnet 3.5, it was like, okay, this is it. This is getting pretty good. But then I think I don't know if your guess, if they're building tools, which is more like the engineering side. I think like once the tools were robust enough to build like the agents, you know, in a way that was like reliable. You know, happy to kind of like chat about this because like that space has evolved so much, you know,
right?
Where it's like, you know, like LangChain, AI SDK, like all these kind of like tools. I feel like that last one is like what gave us the confidence, plus some business needs which we can kind of like chat about, which is like, you know, what are we betting the company on? But once that last piece was in place, meaning like, hey, it's obvious this could work. It's obvious it's a thing. It's obvious like, okay, the tech is here. And then it's like, okay, we have the tools to build the tech, you know?
Yeah.
To kind of like go ahead and do that and have actually something that's like production ready, basically. I mean, like, I feel anyone that tells you like we're fully there, it's not true.
Right.
Because it's like we're pushing the limits, you know? To give you an example, like people on the team would be like, hey, like, you know, this company just released this thing and, you know, we're using it now, you know, like that would have not made possible this AI agent, like, you know, a week ago.
Right.
You know, not to get into too much into the weeds, but like, yeah, it's like, or it's like, hey, we're the ones filing bugs on this framework, you know, that it's like, what would enable this, you know? So we know we're the only ones in the world probably working on this right now, you know? So it's like at that level, you know, it's not like you're seeing some stale things from like 3 years ago and you just happen to be implementing some boilerplate. But yeah, hopefully like that's, you know, that makes sense because I don't think some of these things would have been possible, honestly, like even the models could do it, pulling it all together in a way that you could like package and give it to someone, I don't think was there before.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like for me, it hit like, I mean, same thing. Like it was like in November 22 or whatever, it was like, yeah, oh, cool. I don't go to Stack Overflow anymore. I'm able to code a bunch more stuff, copy pasty kind of thing. Like I can't achieve more. And then I think we had someone on the show who like showed us like a Replit demo. And then for me, that's kind of when I clicked. I hadn't actually used Cursor yet either. And then when he did something and it like created like an analysis like in Jupyter Notebook end to end, and it was like an analysis on a data set that's all over Kaggle and stuff. So there's a lot of context on the internet about this. It's not like he used it on some internal company data that's never been seen before. That's going to be a challenge. But I was still like, okay, dang, it just did that in 10 minutes. And that was like my assignments in college. And I could not do that. That's when it clicked for me. That's like, this will come eventually. I know. What are your thoughts, Hi?
Yeah, no, same. I think in January we had an episode that was kind of like how much time do people have before this unfair advantage sort of erodes away when everyone else kind of comes on board. That's the cursor demo, a cursor demo on a piece of analytics work, and I think that was really what clicked for me personally. Obviously, like, we tried ourselves and things didn't quite work as well as we hope it does, but like over time, we're talking about just months. Like we haven't even turned the calendar year yet, and things have gotten so crazily better. So yeah, I'm totally with you on pushing the edge of the boundary, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with this podcast as well.
One other thing that I don't know if you guys have seen, but I remember the conversations changing like for us internally, and just like me talking to like folks, where like before we were concerned, like the whole thing was like context windows, context windows, context windows. It was like, well, if you just increase this, like this is like the one lever, right? It's like, hey, if you increase this like, exponentially or even linearly, then like all of our problems are going to be solved, right? It was like a matter of like that. And then that, I don't know about you guys, but me talking to like other founders, customers, data folks or whatever, like that is still a concern, but it's not the only thing. It's more like, hey, like, are my agents failing? Are they returning the right things? Are they talking to the other agents correctly? Like actually, and I think that's a normal like technology cycle in a bit, kind of like taking out of data for a second, but it's like sort of like, okay, we went from like this tech is cool to kind of like, okay, can we get this into production and kind of like actually building cool products around this? So I think like the conversation has changed very quickly around some of this.
Yeah, a lot of the conversations we're in now, my work or other people we talk to is now just more around evaluations and reliability and trust. Like, okay, like it's feasible. We can get this stuff to work now. Now, can we understand what it's doing is like correct or not?
Right.
So I think it's a lot of interesting work to do there. But definitely a change in conversation for sure. What do you think about doing a little demo? I have some other questions I want to get into, but I think it might be nice to talk about them in the context of like seeing the product with Seeing Index.
For sure. So basically, this is we're actually setting a customer up. This is like with sample data that we just did for a demo. So this is not the real data, but it's a real customer. And again, I'll keep it probably like, I prefer dark mode, but whatever. It's like you can do whatever you want. So I'm gonna start here, which is kind of like the dashboard sort of like experience. And again, tell me like, because I don't know, like maybe on video it looks better on live mode. Whatever.
Yeah, probably live mode.
Yeah.
A lot of this thing gets done in the middle of the night here in 650 California streets. You might appreciate why we are dark mode shop. Anyways, moving on from there. So basically, there's a few things I want to show you on Index. As you can see, UI, huge focus for us. But it's sort of like, and this is like our dashboard experience. So Index right now, like Index 1.0 is like two surfaces, if you will, is like your dashboard, and then it's your like the data studio, which I'm gonna like show you in a bit. But essentially, it's like this concept where you can come in here, everything's like GUI and everything maps super quickly to the underlying values. And of course, it's like if you're product oriented, you can have like all these like cute little like functionality that you don't even think about, like that little footer that I did to SQL query under the hood, right? But it's like super easy if you're a PM. You don't care really about what is going on, but you just want to make sure you get the values that you want. You're going back to like the examples you were saying about like how UI makes you stay longer. Like one of the silly examples that I love bringing up to people from this like kind of like original index thing is like, I would encourage you to go to your data tool and try to do like undo, like Control Z, which I know you cannot see my keyboard, but I am doing right now. And I just did. and it just like completely like redid everything, right? And it's like little things like that, or I can go back and like, whatever, like redo. It's like little things like that where you can, move very quickly throughout the entire thing and have like a really kind of like the experience that you would expect from modern software. It's so trivial, and there's reasons why other tools cannot have that, by the way. But it's like little things like that that add up over time. And it's like, are people going to use it because I can, have the command bar, or like, I can download that CSV in like one click or with a shortcut? No, but it's like all the little things that kind of like add up, you know? So, it's this sort of like, very nice GUI experience, and you can, have a bar chart and kind of like, do your whole thing, et cetera, et cetera. The other aspect, and you can, add blocks to this. I'm gonna have to remember to kind of like remove this, but yeah, so it's a pretty sort of like classic kind of like dashboard experience with board filters, et cetera, et cetera. But again, super clean UI. Also, obviously, like concept of queries, which is like kind of like the safe queries at a workspace level, so you can reuse them.
Nice.
And then the other thing is your data studio. So I was like literally here before, like where this is like what you would expect, where you would have like, hey, select, from blah 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 with your autocomplete. You can send to board. Now here, like we're very thoughtful about, which I don't know if you could see, like I just like opened there, index where you could ask index to kind of like do like in plain English the what like write your queries essentially, right? And this is like the first feature that we ship around AI. Obviously being
cool.
a lot more thoughtful, and you can do a lot more things, right? Kind of like you mentioned how like the cursor example, obviously taking a lot of like inspiration from that, where it's like, hey, let's not just like write a query, but also maybe add comments to it or explain the query or whatever it might be. And so that was kind of like the very simple, making sure it just works, and people love it, and people are, kind of like obsessed with it. What this made us realize though is like, if this is going to be a huge part of a company and then you want to do it on dashboards and whatnot, all this AI functionality, you kind of have to redo it from the ground up. So for Index 2.0, we'll have all of this and more, which I will show you like right now, a little preview there. And then what I mean by that is like, if you think about it, like right now I have to kind of like, I mean, I'm not going to make it do it live, write the query and all that stuff. But essentially you would have to like, write the query, send it to a dashboard, create the chart, click around like I did a few things. And maybe you want that level of control, but maybe you also want to just like move faster and have the AI help you think through kind of like how to come up with those things. Again, not just if you're a data scientist, but also if you're like that PM that gone to head cannot write SQL query.
Right.
That's why so that's why we're focusing on sort of like Index 2.0, which will be essentially this plus the ability to, I mean, I'm oversimplifying my own baby here, but essentially have ChatGPT connected to your warehouse, right? Which is where you can see me going towards. So the experience, and this is like, it's sort of like being, heavily tested right now, because we want to make sure it's like really good. I don't know about you guys.
That's cool. So you're selecting a data source. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, and so super huge fan of like soccer, obviously, being an international person. Like, I'm hoping the Americans eventually make it, that level of obsession as international folks. In any case, like it's just like everything that we wanted to do from the ground up. It's like, sure, you'll have like dashboards and all of those other things, but that chat experience will be a much stronger part of it, right? And all the other things that we wanted to do in the middle, right? So for example, you saw me select this data source, and it's like, hey, what if like, when you would come in, you would already have, and I hate using the word agents or anything like that, but you would have, a tool that would proactively go out there and search for like, hey, what are interesting questions you might want to ask?
Oh, interesting. That's cool. It's like gone through before you've even asked the question.
Exactly, which can help kickstart a lot of like really interesting things. Obviously, like I showed you this in like sample data, and like, at launch, we might have most of these data sets and some other ones that I know we're working on. Not all of them. We want to make sure like quality is really good. For these data sets, but the same thing can be true from like, hey, like imagine like I add like my HubSpot or my whatever it is, like those things will be on like they also will have like the preview like questions, like, so basically we'll scan proactively your database and you'll be able to have those in there. And so from the thread perspective, this is what it would look like. Again, I'm doing this just to showcase you like in a fast way. But it's essentially what you would again, a customer would think about, where it's like, hey, I can, ask the question, I'll have follow-ups, I'll have, explanations of things, but also I have a little bit of traceability without like the scary thing of like lineage and like, like we'll get there eventually. But it's like, hey, show me the query that was, used to do this. Can I edit this and see how it would change things? Show me what the table underneath looks like. Again, it's a tricky balance between kind of like giving the user context um, and sort of like giving something that's like useful. But it's again,
Yeah.
that sort of like very good experience that will help make, and again, this took 1 minute, 15 seconds, obviously much faster than clicking around and having like the experience of the follow-ups and all of that stuff. It's really, really cool. There's a few other things like, being able to preview the schema easily, when you're asking questions, because I have this issue, like, okay, what is exactly in this table? Can I ask
Yeah.
this? Can I not ask this, et cetera, et cetera. So like this experience, we'll see it like, obviously chat is kind of like a core thing that we're working on now, but seeing that extended to dashboards and the data studio that I showed you guys is what kind of we're working on to make sure that that looks good. But yeah, that's kind of like at a very high level, like, index 1.1.0, which is what customers have now. And then index 2.0, which I kind of spilled the beans a little bit there with you guys, but that's what we're up to.
That's super cool. I mean, I think, a company being able to chat with their data is definitely the future. And I really like the approach you all are taking with providing the context within like what's the query and what's the data actually behind this. So you can still have like some human judgment in there to see if it, double sanity checks on it. And even, I hadn't seen something like that before where it recommends questions to ask. And I've talked to stakeholders who haven't worked with many data people before or are starting on a new product or something, and they're like, I don't even know, like, what do I ask you guys?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of those conversations is just like, let's just start talking and have a brainstorm, and then naturally then it's like you're asking all the right questions all of a sudden. So it's kind of cool that you kickstart that for the user.
One other thing which I didn't show you in the examples that I showed you, which is like the ability to just have it chat with you. It's like, hey, like, let's not like get into charts or whatever. It's just like, let's chat, and we'll like have over time the ability to kind of like, almost like think of it like tools. It's like, hey, I want the chat tool only, like just chat with me for a second. And it's like help navigate through the questions. Like, okay, like, what do you want to measure? Okay, I want to do this. Oh, okay, maybe you should be taking it from this source or that source or whatever it is. So it almost kind of like replaces that sort of like conversation for folks that might not necessarily be as familiar with that data set or that, with that connection. I think it's really cool. But again, the devil's in the details and all of these things, right? That's why we've not hurried to kind of like release something, because it's like, I mean, there's so many little things that you have to handle, and we're almost there, but we also want to make sure it's like high quality, when we ship it. And it's like something that can, that we can stand by, and we know it's like, okay, this works, it's like, it's really solid. We know it's going to give accurate answers, which again, we can get into what does that even mean,
Yeah.
but it's like handling all the little edge cases that I promise you've not even thought about. And I would not wish that upon my worst enemy right now, because there's a lot. And you're like, sometimes you're like, how, why would this do this, so it's a lot of like banging your head against the wall, trying to understand why this AI loves to flip bar charts into horizontally, like for some reason, which it does. There's a bunch of those little things, that give you a little PTSD.
Javier,
But,
you're basically
you make sure you
building.
address.
Yeah, you're basically building an analyst here, right? Like an AI analyst, meaning not just I think a lot of people look at the kind of like the end outcome of the tools and like what it shows and stuff. The chat, like just having a partner to think through what questions to ask, how should I measure these things, what kind of questions I should even come up with. That's a strategic partnership aspect of being in the data field. Are you looking to replace data scientists or data analysts? Is that the mission here?
Great. It's funny, not to make this like a trip through memory lane in college, but I remember like reading, like we took a separate class called Technology, Work, and Capitalism. Basically, the whole class was the master talking about Luddites, which is like this group of people, I'm probably mispronouncing that, but it's like this group of people that are like anti-technology, and they're like, oh, this is going to replace, it's like the people in like 1800s, which is like, the Industrial Revolution, like the mills is going to replace every job. And so every time I hear this sort of like AI kind of like taking jobs away, I'm like, I bet you people did not think YouTuber was or podcaster was a career 20 years ago. So I'm not concerned about that at all. And I feel like if you're in the field building the tools and, this AI cannot flip a chart correctly, I'm like, I think data scientists are going to be fine for a long time,
I'm just a chart flipper now. I just flip charts. It does the rest.
I cannot tell you the type of stuff that we have to deal with because you're fine. I don't think there's going to be a problem there. I think the issue, I think the way we see it, I think you kind of hit it in the head where it's like almost internal. It's like, hey, what are like all the jobs that make up the job of a data scientist, right? It's like there's like the sort of like, the obvious ones, like, clean up the data, create the pipelines, all the way to kind of like summarize reports, send on Slack. Like, but if you kind of like almost like break that down into like 100 tasks, it's like, okay, which ones is AI really good at doing to help people save time, right? So it's like, hey, I'm a PM and
Yes.
I'm like, how should I think about this, Or like, for example, one of the most kind of like silly examples that we do in demos, it's like, hey, find me my top 10 leads to go talk to today. Those are like a demo that we do real quick. It's like, that'll take me like, a few minutes. Now you can have it already loaded for you. It's like if you break down, like, again, the job, it has a bunch of parts. I don't anticipate us replacing all of them, nor any other tool, to be honest. But it's more like, hey, what are the ones that AI is really good at so that we can save people time, basically.
Yeah.
And you are like, hey, I actually enjoy my job and not,
Totally.
I don't have to kind of like spend all this time trying to figure this, clicking on a GUI to kind of like figure things out. And you can, but it's much nicer if you can just like, get AI to do it.
Aside from flipping charts back to their correct axes, where do you see the biggest challenges when you're building this stuff in terms of like, okay, we're still going to need human judgment here for a bit?
So, I mean, there's the stuff, again, human judgment is so important. So like, let me give you a good example so the audience will understand like quickly without getting too into the weeds. It's like I'll give you two really simple ones. So one is like, I really like sports. So a lot of the sample data sets that we have, you saw the World Cup one. That's my favorite one. It works perfect. Like it's like driving a Waymo. It just works, There are others that are not there yet. So for example, one is like the NBA. We have a huge full data set. We download from Kaggle and then cleaned it up and whatever, but it's still not there. And so one of the things is like the AI will tell you that there's like 219 championships, like meaning like the Lakers have won 200 championships. That's impossible because the NBA has only existed for less than 100 years. Again, that's something that the AI cannot figure out, even it's the model and even it's the NBA. So it's something that it could like borrow from the model, without any extra training. Doesn't need business context. Even then, it cannot, and we have reasoning on and all that stuff. Even then, it cannot figure out because the data set is not great. Like the quality of the data set is not there. It confuses playoff games with championships. So it's like, that is the judgment where it's like, there's like the sanity check component of that. I didn't get to show you guys how we're thinking about that, but I think that is where I think we're going to be able to contribute the most, where it's like, hey, this chart feels weird. Why? Essentially, and a magic button that sort of like can go through that, and it's a specific tool just for that task, going back to breaking down the tasks of why things might be off. I think that is one of the things where it's like the judgment component, and there's just like many examples of that, right? Like, I mean, you can categorize those things, right? So it could be like it could be like domain problems of like the NBA thing that I gave you. It could be things like date problems, right? So it's like, AI struggles with like dates a lot, or at least like we've seen that, whether it's like, for example, we just had an issue around like calculating UTC time and how it would like offset things and format things weird or whatever. That's another judgment kind of like problem, but it's just like different. But it's like a human would see it. It's like, okay, the chart renders perfectly, but you're like, okay, these numbers are off, because I asked it year to date and it's giving me December. You're like, okay, it's off by one, something like that. Those things, those are all the edge cases. So again, maybe going to the analogy of Waymo, maybe we are in like the year or 2 years before Waymo was fully self-driving, where it's like, it can probably do most things, but it still needs a little bit of training for those like kind of like edge cases, but that's kind of where we are, I think, and some of the judgment issues that I think we've seen. And again, we try to input as much into a tool as possible so that the end user doesn't have to rely on that. And it's worked very well. There's just like a lot of those things, But again, that also compounds the product into being better and better, basically.
Is there one of the things I heard there is like, so I'm kind of thinking about what has to happen within a company for them to be able to leverage like Index or any of these other like next generation analytics, AI powered tools. There's probably some things that have to be true. One thing I heard from you there is like data quality is going to be a thing. Like if you have a really shitty data, like it's just not going to work. Just like regular analytics isn't going to work. Are there other kind of characteristics where you believe, okay, this product could shine in your circumstance versus, hey, we need to lay these groundwork before that company can really benefit it? Because there's all these companies right now, right? All these teams who are like, we got to use more AI, we got to leverage AI more. And it's not always like turning on a switch. There's like just some growing pains probably that happen.
Yeah. To be honest, I could give you other things, but it's Pareto principle in this one. I think I think data quality, like, everything else might be a distraction, to be honest. And everything that I tell you might be a variation of data quality, to be quite honest, in terms of like things that are necessary to unlock value, quote unquote. I think it's like our job, like tool builders, to kind of like meet people where they are and be like, how can we decrease the friction to make this actually useful? Like almost forget the word AI. Again, I cringe every time I have to use the word agent, really, in this type of context. But it's like, forget those. It's like, think almost like a Swiss Army knife toolbox, or like a little Swiss Army knife thing, where it's like, okay, what tools can I give you that will help you solve a problem today? And it might be trivial, but those little things will add up and build something you actually use consistently and drop the sort of like the expectation of like, okay, this AI thing is going to run my business. It's like, hey, can it help you find 10 leads faster today? Can it help you rank your 10 power users so you can send emails? I'm thinking of like a lot of customer success examples now, but it's like, hey, can it help you prepare a data room faster for your fundraising? Like, are there like specific things that we can sort of like create that can lower the barrier of entry? By the way, this is like a whole thing where we kind of like repurpose Index 2.0 into this thing, and you see us when we bring things over, we're bringing like the chat thing experience first. It's because like one of the things that we faced, I cannot mention all of the customers right now because I remember like we're in the process of like updating lines and all that stuff, but folks that you would know and recognize, I remember approaching them, and being like, and they're like, there's no way we're going to rip out Periscope or Looker on day one, like the ask is too big. So we were kind of like limited to like replacing like people that were really dissatisfied with like a Tableau or a Metabase. And that's really it. But now with like Index 2.0, what we've seen, it's a huge ask. Like, why would you move 300 dashboards remote? Like, that's a huge promise for a slightly better UI, Whereas if you're a startup, okay, I'm starting from scratch, makes a lot more sense, So that's what we kind of like saw. With Index 2.0, this can sit next to your Metabase, your Looker, whatever it is. It's just like over time, a lot of the artifacts would hopefully live more on Index, but it's like lowering the barrier of entry where it's like, oh, this could be a single player tool. It can sit next to your things. It's a co-pilot,
right?
Call it whatever you want, So even in terms of like the tool itself, it's like, hey, how can we just like decrease friction at every step of the way, just so that people actually enjoy using it, and it's not like a quarter project. We need to deploy this thing. It's like, no, like just, you're going to like it. You're going to love it. It's going to help your work. It's going to save you time. So it's like, you can use it even if your company has 3 BI tools, which happens more than what you would imagine. Just talking to a bunch of people out there. I know Nextdoor. Yeah. So companies like Nextdoor, I'm not going to throw your former employer under the bus, but companies of exactly the same size and it's on Market Street, like exactly next to where you guys work. Yeah, exactly on mid-market between whatever. Yes, because I literally go to their offices. So I'm like, wait, So they're using multiple tools, and it's like one of those things where this could sit right next to it, and over time, sort of like earn the right to get into into this sort of like teams and sort of like prove itself, because it's useful, and again, it's like lowering the barrier of thinking of like, oh my God, we can only go for heads of data at Market Street companies, or we can only go for this. It's like, hey, it's like, again, that's on us. It makes our lives more difficult, by the way, but it hopefully makes the product better. If like your PM can use it, your customer success person can use it to analyze their Salesforce data, whatever it is, it's just like, again, breaking down the tasks and just being useful by saving people time rather than kind of like get caught up in like, I think the future of AI is like, agents or whatever it is. Like no one cares about what I think, it's like, can I save you time as the end user? I think that's our compass basically.
That's pretty cool. Honestly, I think one of our previous guests who talked about Vibe Analytics, actually, we posed a pretty similar question to him of, what needs to happen for a tool like that to be able to kind of like, thrive in an organization. I think, at least for me, I was expecting, like similar to where Sean was going initially. Oh, your data quality has to be at this level. This has to be this. And then I remember the thing that he said pretty profoundly, and it kind of is pretty consistent with what you just said, is that we should never assume any company will be ready for anything. Like they're just not going to be ready. Nobody's gonna tell anybody that they're ready for X or ready for Y. So I think it's actually a pretty powerful mindset shift, not from a, like obviously you're building tools and you're kind of like, selling tools, but like also from the flip side of, like data practitioners of, hey, maybe we would be thinking about we're not quite ready for a new tool yet. But then if we kind of think about along the lines of if this incrementally improves my productivity by X, or if this kind of eliminates the 1 or 2 hours of my day spending doing Y, is that worth it? And if yes, then that's kind of like, then maybe that's something to think about.
100%. I mean, I would have, when you brought up the Vibe Analytics thing, not to pull here like a Sam Altman is like, what is AGI? What is our definition of AGI? But it's like, I would be like, what do you consider Vibe Analytics? Like, how do you actually like define that? Is it like me playing with like FIFA World Cup data? I consider that Vibe Analytics, like it's really fun actually. Like it is legitimately fun, but it's like, that is vibe analytics. That's not that different than me using Replit, to kind of like vibe code a sound making app that I did, like that is not that different. Or is it like a PM at a mid-sized company, trying to figure out what zip codes are popping off, like is that vibe analytics, so it's like, it's kind of like a bit of an arbitrary, going back to kind of like how in the data space, people love coming up with this sort of like arbitrary things because they are like the topic du jour, it's like, is there something there, or is it like, I'm much more focused on, I'm sounding like a bit of a jerk here, but like utility, which is kind of like going back to what I was saying. It's like, hey, that's really cool. Will Vibe Analytics help my user save time and money? I sound like a Geico ad, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's like much more focused on the kind of like very, yeah. It's like I do. I mean, we should probably do that. You might have given me an idea there for content, but it's like, can we save you 15% on on your time or insurance? Because like I think that's more like that grounds things. It's like, okay, yes, I can do that for you. No, I cannot do that for you yet. It makes our lives much more easier than like, oh, I'm going to build this like Vibe Analytics tool, and that whole thing, which can send you down like a bit of a weird rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, I think like basing yourself in the actual user value and work to be done is for sure the right way to go, rather than like, hey, I have this like vision of like what analytics should be one day, and this is what we're going to do.
One other thing before or anything else is like, I think again, going back to like, what is secular, what's not changing, what are the actual macro trends here? Like, I don't know if you guys remember, like there was a huge thing around like no code tools, that it really reminds me of this like vibe coding thing, where it's like everyone got pigeonholed into like, is this like a no code thing, and everyone had like an angle on that, and that was like every website, and like a bunch of companies got funded and bloated on that. So it's like I try to avoid that. I'm thinking more of like, what's not going to change? Companies are going to have more data tomorrow than today. Probably yes. Companies are going to still need to understand the data. Probably yes. It's sort of like, what are the things that are not going to change? Because you really don't want to base your, every day of your life on something that might not be vibing, no pun intended, next week when there's like a new term or a new concept, you have to kind of like repivot your entire life around whatever Twitter or VCs want to talk about.
Do you think there's new skills people will have to kind of learn as tools like Index begin to, save time? So I could imagine maybe someone who's not data scientist, like you mentioned, like the PM who knows SQL, but also people who like don't know SQL at all or something like that. At some point, there being expectations of like, hey, do you know how to like ask these sort of analytical questions? But I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Like kind of thinking about what are skills people should invest in as this kind of world of analytics changes?
There's two ways in which you can take this question, right? One is like the pure skills, sort of like broadly speaking, kind of like skill set, kind of like career thing. And the other one is more like the value of SQL itself, which I think we also kind of like talked a little bit about. I think, again, what's not going to change is the same as always. Good judgment, understanding goals, driving metrics, like those things won't change and those things are going to be the same, like good intel, like around like, hey, what questions should we be even asking? Even be asking the AI this question, there might be like analytics slop. Like if you want to be coining terms here, there might be a bunch of like bad threads, bad
analytics
chats,
slop. You heard it here first on the Neighbor podcast. That is coined.
Clip it.
Javier coined that.
clip it. Yes, thank you. Data slop. I'm looking forward to my speaking engagements
Data
after
slop,
this
even
on.
better.
I'm gonna write this one. Yeah, I'm gonna write this one for 18 months. So there might be that, and again, to avoid that, it's like the same things are always true, right? Like judgment, sort of like doing that stuff, that sort of thing. I think that the other side of like the value of SQL, there's so many ways of thinking about this. This is like a good intellectual problem to think about. My theory is like it will always like matter, and it might even matter more, just because it's like there's like lingua franca now that everything kind of like boils down to. And if you think about like, again, it's very dangerous to think around like metaphors. But if you think about like cursor and code, right? It's like because you have cursor doesn't mean like code doesn't matter. It matters probably more than ever, you know? Because it's like the thing that it resolves into, you know? It's like kind of like, you know, the artifact, if you will. And for us, it is the artifact. Like everything, like for example, we have connections on Index 2.0. So one of the big things that we just not have databases like relational DBs and warehouses. We also have Stripe and Salesforce and HubSpot and all that stuff. Those all resolve into SQL, for example, right? So it's like you're actually querying SQL, you know, a BigQuery instance specifically, always. Doesn't matter you know, because again, helps us do a bunch of other things. So my thing is like, hey, it will matter more than ever, but also it'll be more abstracted than ever. So it's like, it's a deeper philosophical question, I think. I think from our perspective, it's like our users don't care. Our users want a good tool that helps them. It's like, this is like a very good analogy. I don't know if you guys have heard it. And I think Dylan at Figma uses this quite a bit for explaining Figma, which is like, because it's a pro tool for designers in this case, but other people as well. It's like you want to have a very low floor and a very high ceiling, you know? It's like you want the tool to be very easy to use for a complete noob, and they can actually get value of it. And if you have the best designer in the world, that should be their tool, you know? That's a very hard task to do, but it's sort of like your responsibility if you consider yourself a steward of like the space or the category. And so for us, it's like very similar. And so in that case, it's closer to like Figma than Notion, for example, where it's like, hey, like we want to have a very low floor, people that don't care about SQL, all the way to kind of like, you know, I'm a staff data scientist at, you know, next neighborhood. And, you know, I want to, you know, run all of my data stack there. My suspicion is like we'll start at the bottom end of that. And over time, as we have more, you know, team members and stuff like that, we'll build up the capabilities. So you won't see us going head to head with Looker today, you know, and have every bell and whistle that they have, but really earning kind of like that bottom of the market and sort of like over time making it more and more of a pro tool. But yeah, those are kind of like my views more on like, you know, the importance of SQL and like how do you think about building that into a tool, if that makes sense.
Yeah, more important than ever, but like, yeah, more abstracted than ever, like you said. I think that makes a lot of sense.
It's nuanced, you know, there's not like a bite-sized like 10-second answer that I can just give you that it's like, you know, perfect, yeah.
I think we've got our trailer quote here already.
Between that and data slop, I mean, I'm like, put it on a hat, you know? I'm like, I see the guys like now starting a whole merch line now. And then, listen, I just want rev share on this, you know? If you handle most of the front, then I'm fine with any, you know? I'm fine with some credit or something, you know, for data slop.
Yeah, I feel like we could do some collab on data slop hats for sure. And then I'll swing by your office and drop one off when he's there.
I mean, yeah, you just walk over, you know, like, yeah.
We're on the 12th floor, so just a few elevator floors away.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, no, but it's, yeah. I mean, it's really moving really, really fast, and it's moving fast from different places, right? Like the data world, it's super noisy, and we've seen companies come and go, you know, even in the short time that we've sort of like, relatively speaking, short time that we've been building the company, but also like in just like the engineering world of like building tools, you know, it's pretty crazy how quickly things are, you know, how quickly things are moving and changing.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question around 5 years from now, but I feel like we can't even fathom. But I don't know what your thoughts are on like the future of like how are people inside of companies going to get answers from their data? I mean, obviously chat. Like do dashboards still stick around? I don't know.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on this, but I'm actually sorry, like not to turn it around on you guys, but I'm actually curious, like you guys, what do you think? Like, what are you excited about? Which can be two different answers, but yeah, like in 5 years, what do you wish, you know, was a reality? Well, I have some thoughts, and I'll share with you, but yeah.
I've been working on watching YouTube videos, learn how to fix my car because I figure I learn mechanic skills, so I'll be helping the robots kind of like stay alive. I mean, I'm out of a job in 5 years. I'm not a data person anymore. Obviously, I'm just like, and like I told I and I talked about this. Like, yes, there could be robots that fix the other robots, but they're doing much more important tasks, so they give that to the bags of flesh like us. No, I think, yeah, humans. So yeah, humans.
You're laughing, but
they like to be called humans.
Those Waymos won't fix themselves, so it's like,
hey,
I don't know, man.
If Waymo buys
Becomes a
Subarus
transformer.
or the Jags, then I know how to do some stuff.
Yeah,
how to interact. I feel like, it's so hard to imagine now. I feel like chat is like obviously happening now, but I could see things where it's like you're kind of like how you had the suggested questions, but like just stuff going on in the background and thinking about stuff before you even have where you're logging in on the morning and there's already insights or decisions or recommendations made for you and your team based on like analysis happening in the background that you haven't even thought of. So kind of like I could see that like further in the future kind of thing, but it's so hard because like you said, things are moving so fast. And like we've started off with this episode talking about like when we saw some turning points just within the same calendar year, it's like I think about it differently. So who even knows? What about you, Hai?
Yeah, pretty similar actually. Like proactive, not like alerts, but like proactive, what you need to know is right at your fingertip. You don't even need to think about it. And then also proactively, based on what it's seeing, it knows the limitation and then asks the humans what could be done next, meaning like, should we have this sort of data that we don't have visibility into yet? Should we be doing X, Y, and Z? Sort of like, kind of like not just going back and like understanding what's happened anymore. It's everything is about like, hey, what's next, what's next, what's next? And then that's where kind of like all the humans come in to think about if that actually even makes sense in the whole grand scheme of things.
It's almost like the development of like a human data analyst something over time. Like you start out your career and you're not only reactive, you're being told what to do. And then eventually you're kind of reactive with your team. And then you get to a point where you're like kind of can understand, you're like proactive, you're understanding what your team is going to ask eventually. And then you get to a point where it's like, my team would never even think of this stuff if I wasn't here. And I feel like that's where like AI gets like, I don't know, like maybe it's a dashboard that's like really context aware and shows only certain graphs or stuff based on what's going on in the company and who's looking at it. I have no idea, but you guys go build that. Yeah.
I'll give you my thoughts. I think, so there's two parts to the thought. The first one is kind of like, not to piggyback on what you guys are saying. That is part of that, right? Like when you break down the task of a data scientist is like really that. Part of that is like sort of like monitoring constantly. There are some challenges as a builder in that, which is like you might, if you have any observability tools turned on, the noisiness that can come from like false positives, essentially, that can just like constantly. So you really have to build it correctly, that's why you don't like jump the gun on these type of things. But yes, essentially like being proactive around, constantly searching for the insights and the follow-ups. I don't know if you guys remember how like predictive analytics kind of never really became a thing, although it was going to be a thing. I remember, and I'm not saying like the A/B testing stuff. I'm saying more like the, hey, we'll help you forecast type of thing. I think that, that is like the end of the supply chain of data, of the data slob, if you will, which is kind of like coming up with snag. I definitely think that's the one part of it, right? So more autonomy, and more proactiveness. I think the second part, which I wish I don't hear people talking about, is, and go with me here for 1 second on a little trip. I think the core thing is going to be better interconnectedness, or interconnection across like all the data. And I'm not just saying kind of like putting everything on your warehouse, but I'm saying kind of like, okay, I have this data in here on index, let's say, and it's like, can I affect change somewhere else? Like in a way that's simple and obvious, which is not now. I'm not saying like reverse ETL into some like Salesforce or whatever. I'm saying like, hey, I got my top 10 leads, send them an email right from index, right? Or right from your data tool of choice. And sort of like bringing the role of the data person as a center role, like business, kind of like core to the business rather than this like auxiliary thing that informs the business. But to do that, you need to unlock the access to those kind of like data pools, or build those connections and make them obvious in a way that they're not there today, to be quite honest. Like the being proactive, you can see it. You can squint your eyes and you can be like, yeah, I can see the index guys taking this feature and like, ramping it up. But the other part is not fully there. But I think it's what's going to take this from like, oh, this is like a cool tool. So it's like, okay, I need this to run my business more than I need any other, any other thing. And it's going to make it much more valuable and much more interesting, right? And I think hopefully like the role of the data, scientist in a way. It's much more action oriented, you know? So you might see like data science people more in sales, more in product, more in like much more embedded than what they really are now, almost as like business people taking action on things. This is a trivial example of like sending the emails, but it's like, hey, updating campaigns or whatever it is. But I just don't, or even letting AI do that, right? But it's just not quite there yet. And that's my hope, to be quite honest, because it's like, it just shortens the feedback loop, like it collapses it basically, right? It's like, okay, this is like a really cool data insight. Let me post this on a Slack screenshot or on a deck or on a report, you know, then when will someone act on that insight? It might be days, months, you know? Whereas like if the data was much more connected, we could take action on it immediately. That is the other point. I might have to kind of like articulate it a little bit better for a LinkedIn post or whatever, or a hat, you know?
Right.
But that is one thing that I think people are not talking enough about, which is like, how does that look like? And I don't think it's like ETLing back and it's not the current paradigm. Something different will have to happen. I just don't know what it might be, but that's what I'm hoping for. That, you know, we can bring these things closer together, which would be great for you, you know, because maybe you don't have to kind of like work on, you know, fixing Waymo's, you know, in 5 years. And, you know, you might actually have more of an important role, you know, and maybe let the
Nice.
PMs go fix Waymo's, or I don't know, like something else, you know, not to throw fellow PMs under the bus. But
Nice. That's awesome. Well, I think we're coming up on an hour. It's been a fun conversation. Thank you so much, Javier, for spending the time with us. And I think this is probably a good point to close it out. To our audience, thank you so much for listening and for watching. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe and leave any comments for any of us or Javier. We'll get to every single one of them.
Yeah, let us know how much you'd pay for a data slop hat. And
I was just going to say that.
You pay enough money?
Merch.
Yeah, we're synced, man. You pay enough money, then we'll make some data slop hats happen. And check out Index.
We'll definitely do that. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. It was really, really fun.
Cool.
Thanks.
Awesome. See you all.